school.
Hello, everybody. My name is Joel Filderman, and welcome to the Dog Trainers Connection. I am not a dog trainer. These other people you see here are. We get together, we discuss a topic, come up with some thoughts, some ideas, sometimes some answers. We always have an interesting discussion. Today's topic, trainers, what I would like to talk about is controversy in dog training. What I would like to talk about is the infighting that is going on with dog trainers and has been for many years. It would be easy to say, oh, well, this is because everybody's fighting now and etc. But this has been going on since probably the 70s, if not before that. And Steve, I'm going to start with you because you can probably talk about that better than most.
Old, right? Because
Yeah, you old bastard.
I was trying to be nice, but
it's fine. I'm getting used to it. You know what I mean?
It's old school.
Anyway, so hey, yeah. Listen, it seemed that in the old days, we could even talk 60s, 1960s, when you'd hire a dog trainer, and there was the Colonel Konrad Most approach to training, right? That book that was always so hard to get a hold of, like Training Dogs by Colonel Konrad Most. And it was like,
so it was military style training, basically.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it was very well written, and very clear. And I remember when I first started getting trained myself, I was told, I was reading the Keeler book, but I was told, oh no, you need to read Konrad Most, because that's where it all comes from in this country. So I did. I was able to dig up a copy. I think I have 3 or 4 of them now on my shelf, and it was as suggested, very clear, all about compulsion, very well explained the technique and how that technique was not damaging physically to the dog, and that sort of thing. And then I just, as we all do, I read John Holmes and the Farmer's Dog, and he used a stick and all that. But there was a lot of talk about, well, there's this way or that way. It was all somehow related to a single approach to training. And if you took your dog to training, even if you went to Blanche Saunders and she issued you a chain choke and a 6-foot leash, she taught you how to use it and time it and how to make an effective yet humane correction and all of that stuff, putting your foot on the leash to urge the dog to, that was the way, right? There was nobody to say that's not the way.
So what happened?
They followed the model, right? Well, I guess folks, back when we had the Society of North American Dog Trainers, and we would meet every month.
Okay.
So I think the demise of that organization occurred because we sat at a table every month and looked at one another, and we were past the days of there's only one way. It was coming down the pike. I feel that Dr. Ian Dunbar had something to do with that. He kind of came around. In those days, the AKC Gazette had articles published every month. So if you would get a subscription, you get your magazine, and Carol Lee Benjamin had an article every month. So did Dr. Dunbar. And, they didn't necessarily connect so well. They got along fine as individuals, but they had different ideas. And so Dunbar had the friendly dog training concept going, and Carol had been following, as she was trained back in the day, the way. Well, now Dunbar comes in and says, well, there are other ways, and we can do it this way. I do remember when there was the one way. If you showed up with like treats, you were almost ridiculed about it. It's like, is that, you need that to train a dog, and so things started right away to get a little puffy. Now, well, every month we would sit and look at each other, and these are all very notable dog trainers, seasoned authors, famous in the dog training industry, and well loved and admired. But then started with this, came the ones that were less happy with the old way. And rather than have respect for what was, sort of like throwing the baby out in the bathwater.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that seems to have continued. So when we would get together every month in the early days, it was lovely. We'd have tea and we'd talk dog training and dogs, and it was fantastic, really.
Hmm.
Had lots of great guests and stuff. But then started to come the arguments about technique, where we weren't really put together to talk about technique. We were talking about industry stuff. We wanted to do something where we could maybe influence studies,
Hmm.
legality, stuff about legalities and
Sure.
animals, this kind of stuff. Well, it turned into this whole mishmash of, and,
Steve, could I
so
just interrupt and ask you a question? You mentioned about being ridiculed for using food. Was that something you experienced or saw other people? And why do you think somebody chose to try food? Because that's interesting that
well,
they were ridiculed back then for that.
well, they became dog trainers that used food were called foodies. That was a derogatory term,
Oh,
the foodies.
oh,
So
okay. So that was
So
going
that was
on.
before the cookie pushers. They were called the foodies.
the foodies, right?
Okay.
Oh,
So,
wow.
but if you looked at
That's a,
animal trainers as a general group rather than
Hmm.
dog trainers,
yes.
food was very commonly used as a reward. I
Sure.
mean, right, Skinner didn't just pop out, he'd been there, he was an old guy. He was, he's been doing this stuff a long time. So marine mammal trainers,
Yeah,
some
we all have seen the dolphins or the whales being,
Using
the
fish.
seals or whatever it is. I'm trying to say there.
yeah,
Yeah, with the fish. Yeah.
right, and
Yeah.
birds of prey,
Right.
I mean, all that
Yeah.
stuff. So, that's
So
sort of
when a dog trainer brought food, by the older school people, they might have been ridiculed for that. Okay.
and so making it seem like bribery as opposed to like reinforcement.
Hmm.
Right. Right.
And they had all their reasons for why food wouldn't necessarily work, and but then you have the other guys. So this thing has been around for a long time. It's been around for a long time, and you know what? Honestly, I have no problem with the discussion at all. I think it's very valid to talk about these things, and somehow because I'm old, I come to appreciate being
Sure.
a fool, but having the skills and knowledge of using compulsion when necessary, and using that Lima model, which we, I think, as a group of forum people, very much, kind of enjoy looking at it that way. We're going to do what we can to minimize any kind of negative training, but when it's necessary or becomes necessary because you have exhausted all of your
Hmm.
positive, we can
Yeah.
either say, well, maybe you just aren't that good at the positive thing, or we can say maybe this dog is just not that motivated
Sure.
and needs an
Right. Right.
Yeah.
approach. If you have another way to go, you find yourself empty-handed, which dog
Right.
trainers like to find themselves that way. We like to have solutions. So I thought that the whole I enjoy having had the education, like what I
Hmm.
feel full education in this field. I'm a little nervous now, and because I see social media is like busting. Dog training has become like some kind of like thing. There used to be a small group of dog trainers, but it's like unbelievable now.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's great in a way, but in another way, it's like you can't jump out and have like 2 years of like skills and
Yeah.
like
Where's
it takes a long time. Like
where's the handling? Yep.
handling,
Where's the actual skills of doing the dog training and dealing with all different kinds of dogs and situations, and like me getting a Norwegian elk hound that I couldn't walk, and I'm an experienced dog trainer, and none of the other tools that my friends said, get this one, get that one, it didn't work for us or for the dog or for me or for Joel. And it just it hurts that, that somebody says, in all situations, using a prong is cruel and inhumane. It makes no sense.
They're out there, but you know what? If you've been around forever and ever, I'm going to at least listen to you. I want to listen to you. But if you've been around for a couple of years, I mean, I feel like 50 years later, I still learn when I go out.
Sure.
You learn as you do. And it seems like every single case, you walk away with a little something more than you had when you went in.
Yeah.
You can't have that after 2 years. I'm sorry. And you know what? If you realize that, but your heart and soul, great. Keep on.
Yep. And you'll learn.
Jeff,
But-
do you want to?
Oh, I think we lost Steve's audio.
Did you?
No.
Oh, no. Oh, okay.
I think they were
Okay.
they were speaking at the
Sorry.
same time.
Same time. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So, I'm
Yeah, go ahead,
sorry.
Steve.
I was just going to say, like it's not to the community, the dog owning community, for somebody to have a couple of years under their belt and advertise that they have like super behavior skills and, all these things. And what did you really do? And maybe they've trained a couple of dogs, maybe really even well. But we know, because we got our boots on, that training a couple of dogs doesn't make it. You really got to expose yourself to lots of dogs, lots of issues, and before you can really call yourself a professional. But they're out there, they're taking people's money, it's expensive. And I feel kind of bad about this whole thing. And what can you do? I was them once upon a time. It's just that I didn't advertise myself as some like super expert when I first started training dogs. I wouldn't have had the nerve to do that.
Mhm.
Well, I'm going to throw this out to everybody because this was something that Bonnie and I were talking about earlier, which is how much of it is that now dog training has become more theoretical than actually practical. It's, what is, we've discussed this, of course, with certifications and this and that and the other thing, but it's more that if I've got that certification, right, did this class or whatever it is, now I'm a dog trainer, I may not have even trained 2 dogs, let alone 5. So how much of the problem is that? How much of the problem is just general not listening to others? Does anybody?
So I honestly, I really think it's a generational issue.
Okay.
I'm not picking on the younger generation, but what's happening in the dog training community, there is a direct correlation with the behavior of young people in other arenas in life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I hate to say that, and I'm not minimizing their acumen and I'm not minimizing their skill,
Mm-hmm.
but to go back, Steve touched on a really good point, is to ridicule just for the sake of ridicule,
Mm-hmm.
right? Causes us to miss opportunities for growth.
Sure.
Right. And I'm in the same line. I think we're all in the same line, especially I think as we get older, we realize we can always continue to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I was 17, I thought I knew everything about everything. Now granted, obviously our life experiences cause us to believe certain things, generally speaking, but as it relates to our profession, I can tap into so much experience for so many different breeds that I've worked.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get a dog that contradicts all of my previous experience.
Yep.
So do I keep hammering the square peg in a round hole, or do I tap into my completely full and diverse bag of tools to work that individual dog the way that individual dog needs to be motivated, whether it is food or toys or affection, or I need to be assertive, or I need to sound like a squeaky mouse, right? I don't care. I'm not proud, and I'll bribe a friggin' dog. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I'll use tools if I need to,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think what is happening now too is, and I don't want this to come across as an indictment on a certain demographic, but right, historically we've had, especially over the past 25 years, we had more of the spectrum of dog training expanding, right? At one point, like Steve said, it was traditional. It was this way, this way, this way, right? Then we started moving more towards more animal-based behavior type things like food motivation or toy motivation, which they do with marine mammals too sometimes, because some of them enjoy bouncing that beach ball around, right?
Yeah.
So we started moving more towards the middle, but we still had that traditional. And I can't speak for other countries. It seems to only happen in America, where we overcorrect everything. So now we're all, the wave is all over here, that if you're not only using food, you're an animal abuser. Like, that's it. Like, this small demographic, they drew this line in the sand that if you don't do this our way, right, you are harming animals. Now, there's a few reasons why they think that, and I'll use tools as an example, because I use tools if I have to, right? If it enriches a dog's life, improves the relationship, gets that dog out walking, and quality of life improves, right? It's all good stuff as far as I'm concerned, right?
Right.
Granted, there's still people that are abusing animals with tools, so I'm not ignorant to that. I understand that. But we can't, I'm trying to choose my words delicately here. I don't know how to say this. I'm sorry. I'm trying to be. All right. Let's just say that line in the sand is causing the entire industry to be afraid to do what's right. Right? Because I mean, I have a dog now that, I mean, she's a tripod. She's completely shut down. She won't even make eye contact with me. She won't even eat in front of me, let alone take food. She was feral, never been on a leash. I have her on a loop leash. Okay. And for anyone watching, a loop leash is considered a compulsion tool.
Right.
Okay. It's basically a choker, right? Number one, I can't let her escape because she's a flight risk, even though she's a tripod, right? But number two, I need to be able to stand my ground. I'm not correcting her because she's too shut down. I would never correct a dog, but I need to stand my ground and just wait. And she pulled it out, did her alligating roll. I didn't correct, I didn't talk, I didn't treat. I just waited. And she's over it. And she's here 16 days, if that, right? People say, what'd you do? I did nothing. That was my approach for that dog, right? Now, if she was in a good, stable state of mind and a really well-tempered dog and had some behavioral issues, might I give him a pop on the leash? Maybe. I would never do that to a dog that's shut down, though, because that's, in my opinion, it's inappropriate, and not good for the dog.
Right.
But to have this whole demographic, this little demographic impacting the community as a whole, which is trickling over to the dog owner community now.
Yes.
I'm sorry. So. I'm just going to say it. They whine like little babies, because they're not, if you try to have a conversation about operant conditioning, forget it. They are going to whine, and I guarantee you, ultimately, they will start calling you names. And that's the generational part I was talking about. I was trying to avoid that. There's just no other way I can go around it. They're whiny little babies. Like, and I mean, and some of these certifications, to your point, Joel, like they obviously there's a knowledge base, which I'll be honest, my acumen was probably more diverse 20 years ago than it is today.
Sure.
I don't speak about dog training the way I did when I was, younger and all into the books. Like I just speak like I speak now. I don't care. Right.
Right.
But these certifications now, I mean, look at the requirements for the mechanical aspect of their training. 15, 20 hours. I did that last week. They do 15, 20 hours. They get certified. Maybe they volunteer at a shelter for a little bit, which is awesome. But nothing beats experience. And I fear for the future of dogs not dog training, the future of dogs.
I fully agree with that.
It
Sure.
it can't be just one way. We have to
Mhm.
have a full bag at our disposal to help a variety of personalities. And I think, again, the generational thing is a big issue. And I think a lot of it has to do with social media.
Okay.
Because it's not just about them voicing their opinion and whining and bitching and name calling, but, and this is above my pay grade, but there are a lot of studies done on likes and comments and views
Oh, yes.
with young people and how it stimulates their, what the hell is that happy thing?
Endorphins.
There you go. Yeah, that
Yes.
thing. Like,
Yes.
that's like,
Yes.
those are serious issues that are that the future of
Mhm.
dogs, I feel bad about. And I hope if there's younger generations of dog trainers, if someone does something that maybe you don't like, just consider that you don't understand,
Hmm.
right? Because if I don't understand something, that puts me in a position of, well, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Well, help me understand. This is great.
You're
As
open
opposed
to
to,
the.
no, I mean, you have to use chicken jerky. You can't use beef jerky. It has to be chicken. I mean, just open the mind a little bit,
Right.
because at the end of the day, why did we talk about this all the time? Why did we all get started for the dogs?
Right.
As soon as it becomes something about other than the dogs, we either need to check out and do something else, or again, open
Right.
our mind.
Well, so Bonnie, I'm going to ask you, has it become something other than for the dogs?
Yeah, I think it has been, and I think, back to our discussions about organizations, certifications, money, even the talk about what dogs are adopted out and how many dogs there
Mhm.
are, and the state of dogs. And we had a whole discussion on that, and why there's so many behavioral issues in
Mhm.
dogs that are adopted out, and bites. I know Joel was talking about, because Valerie had brought up the amount of dog bites, and I think, I don't know, old school, and we were talking about old school, your parents, they wouldn't let you mess with a dog, because they'd say, you're going to get bitten. They'd smack you, smack the dog, do something, and you'd be like, oh, okay, I won't do that again.
They used to say, see, I told you. And that was it.
Right. And
The dogs. That's
but
what
they did.
what they do. That's your
Yes.
fault. It was your
Right.
fault.
Yep. But they
And
they would train the children not to do things, and then the dogs wouldn't do things because the children wouldn't be antagonizing them, and and people seem to just be not all there about how to have children in the home with dogs, and to what let them do and not do. I tend to go overboard with worrying about that, and oh my God, the dog can't be here and up on the bed and with the baby, and sometimes it's okay, but a lot of times it's not, and so many children are bitten because the parents just think it's okay for the dog to have the mouth on the toddler's hand. And so I agree with you, Jeff. It's like a generational, societal thing of just how people are dealing with dogs with their children, and then how the younger folks are coming up, and it's not in a good state in this country right now, and sad for our profession.
The thing is that the trainers, so, we could talk about the dog owning public, but,
Right.
what troubles me is the mentality of the trainers that, let's call them the new wave.
Mhm.
They don't know. It's just like history. Where'd you learn your history? Your United American history. Where'd you learn your American history?
Mhm.
That is really valid and real, versus what, might have been left out of the book,
Mhm.
changed a little bit. I felt like we had a little bit more than than there might be in the current American history text that's being taught today in schools. And when it comes to dog training, I think if you latch on to the one way, and it's like Jeff said, well, if it gives you an opportunity to learn if you're
Yes.
minded enough. But if you're not, then you turn into that rabid other person who's like, oh no, you can't do that.
Right.
Wait a minute,
Yes.
I don't know anything about that, right? I don't want to know anything about that,
Yeah.
right? So
And that's strange, Steve, because dog trainers, as Joel always said, are like forever students and want to learn and
Perpetual
keep
students is what
perpetual students. That's what Joel always says. And you'd think at some point you'd go, oh, well, let me learn about that. I may make me feel uncomfortable, but I want to learn about it anyway. And that doesn't seem to be happening.
no, I clearly remember when a popular dog trainer published this thing about remote collars, and it was nasty. And in the next monthly periodical, a veterinarian who was also a breeder of golden retrievers
Mm-hmm.
had won lots of AKC field awards with the dogs, not just conformation, but actually working Goldens, wrote in and said, I think you don't understand the benefits of using remote collars, and invited the dog trainer to the property. Please come down to my kennel. I'd love to show you how this works, so that you understand, how we use these things in a very humane way and effectively. The response back was, thank you for your invitation. I have no desire to ever use what she called so the veterinarian was calling it a remote, and the dog trainer responded by calling it a shock collar.
Mm.
There's always those semantics and all that stuff, but
Mhm.
I would never, thank you for the invitation, no. So, even if you don't trust a veterinarian, where are we going here? These people put a lot of time, effort, money into getting their education to spend their life helping animals.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
They don't get into this thing to be harming animals. This is a veterinarian who's actually breeding and working a sporting breed, getting titles, says a lot about the time and effort being put in, time spent with the dogs and getting it done, right? And willing to teach, come on, come ahead. And the answer is no, I would never, it's like, who are you? But you're writing in a monthly periodical as an
Mhm.
expert and writing books. And the kids are reading that stuff because that's what's more of it, because nobody sees Konrad Most book anymore. It's out of print, and they're not about to reprint it. I don't even know how many of my old friends, Mordecai Siegel, Carol Lee Benjamin, Joe Michael Evans, I don't know how many of their books are still being published. You
Mhm.
have to go to an old bookstore to get that stuff because they're not
Yeah.
available, which is criminal to the profession. It's
Mhm.
criminal, because if you only read this one thing, this is the way. No, the other stuff, dangerous, hurtful, cruel,
Yeah,
inhumane.
but even when they do read the stuff that we're still reading, Lima, for instance, how twisted has Lima gotten in the dog training? I mean, for all intents and purposes, Lima is now synonymous with force-free training.
Yes,
Mhm.
it is.
What the hell, Lima, did they study? I mean,
It's
and-
right in the
And
name of
it's-
the acronym.
yeah, I mean,
I mean,
least invasive, minimally
Yeah.
aversive.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't mean force-free, no aversion. Now,
Right.
and I guess this leads to my other point too, is, and I've said this before on various discussions because we talk about so much stuff here.
Yeah.
And first of all, when we train privately, we have to train within the parameters and comfort level of our clients and the dogs, right?
Of course.
So I'm just going to talk about my own dogs, okay? I want my own dogs to be exposed to as much shit as possible.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's unpleasant. Okay. The UPS truck is unpleasant. Gunshots, which I have no control over down here in the South, is
Mhm.
unpleasant. I had to work through that. Okay. There are things that are unpleasant. Okay. We live life. There's things that are unpleasant.
Mhm.
Okay.
Every
Okay.
day.
Do you know what also is unpleasant? Operant conditioning positive punishment. It literally means adding something unpleasant to the dog's life, which is also misconstrued by this younger generation. They automatically think punishment means physical, and it
Mhm.
doesn't. We are adding some kind of stimuli or something unpleasant to the dog's life. It could be the clap of a hand. It could be a
Mhm.
whistle. It could be anything. I've had a clicker inadvertently be positive punishment
Sure.
because the dog freaked the frig out when I clicked it.
Yeah, of course.
When
Been
I
there.
was trying to charge the clicker so the dog would
Been there,
respond to
done
it.
that.
Freaked the hell out. I had to get
Mhm.
rid of the clicker.
Mhm.
And I had to start using a dog squeak toy in place of the clicker.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is that the younger generation, and again, this is where there's a lot of correlation in other areas of life, where interpretation of stuff, I just don't know where they're getting it, because the stuff that tells us about it is not the
Yeah.
stuff that's coming out of their mouths.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But then you have the quote unquote experts who are reinforcing that. You have the,
I
so.
guess, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I've seen a lot of videos of a very prominent force-free New Jersey dog trainer, and this dog is yanking him around on an 8-foot leash, even though it's on a harness. The
Mhm.
dog is uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Dog is stressed, but he's got a harness on, so that's okay.
Right.
The dog is clearly not. There is no
Relaxed.
force free going on there at all. But because the harness is on and there's sweet talk and food involved, it is what it is. But and that's why people like me, right? Because I'll use tools, gentle leaders, halties, star marks. I'll use a metal prong once in a blue moon. Haven't in a while, just because I haven't needed to. Martingales are probably my go-to because just easier for the dogs that come here because they know they're going on transport and they need something secure around their
Yeah,
neck.
sure.
Probably why I choose that. But the reason why we are ridiculed is because of exactly how I used to be 25 years ago.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
rightfully so. Like people, I admit it all the time. I was yank and crank in the mid 90s. That's what I knew.
Yeah.
I learned better, but I
Yeah.
don't abandon stuff that's still
Yeah.
helpful.
And we don't get credit for, changing and having used something in an inappropriate way or too forcefully, and then growing and learning, and then adapting things, learning new tools, learning the clicker, learning to use food, but we shouldn't be afraid to say, look, I had a client and we had to go with a prong because this woman was, or man was crippled and they could not walk this forceful, powerful dog and they needed to get out. And the
Mhm.
dog seems to be okay and fine with it and is getting out and the person's happy. And that's the bonding. Everybody talks about emotions and bonding. Well, if you're happy and your dog's happy because it's getting out and can do sniffing, you're bonding, and that's a good thing. But if you said, oh, I'm not going to use that, you're never going to improve or advance to a better state with the client and their dog. And we're in it for the dogs. I mean, that's really true.
I mean, but they've all been. Listen, Joe Bevins once said to me, you got to be a good dog trainer, you sometimes have to get comfortable with doing uncomfortable things. May he rest in.
Mhm.
Came out of his mouth like this, and I understood right away. He also said, because I'm a guy who likes to examine the characteristics of the individual dog, he said to me, it's really interesting that you look at the dogs that way in terms of their character, because I'm more concerned with learning how to build good character and an otherwise, maybe not so well put together dog. And I'm like, I'm with you. It's all that. And then I will also say that one of my heroes, Dr. Bob Bailey, who is like the king of positive reinforcement, really, all those years I taught animal behavior, I would show those 5 DVD disc set. I would watch it semester after semester. And what's always stuck in my mind is when he would say, force punishment should not be the first approach and should only be used by those who have skills, right? Not never, right? Not never, right? It shouldn't be your first go-to, and it should be administered by those who know how to do that. And be more or less, most of the old school. Now, I find that on social media, I'm finding that there's a whole lot of shock collar stuff going on, and I have no problem with a shock collar, but it wouldn't be the first thing I strap on a dog's neck. No problem, bitch. It wouldn't be the first thing. You want to teach first, right? You want to do as much teaching in the most positive possible way that you can before you go to corrections. Correcting that doesn't know what's expected is insane, I think.
Yeah.
And back in the old days, I would say we taught via corrective approach, right? That was our way, right? We had a good touch to it. You know, the king of compulsion trainers looked like artists. They were not, you didn't hear dogs screaming and yelling. They were amazing with the leash and the collar. You know, they didn't choke these dogs. They had that speed. They had the type of correction in the same time gap as a clicker clicks for the other side. I mean, beautiful. And if you overcorrected a dog in front of these guys, they were on your back like fists. What are you doing? You're hurting the dog. You know, using corrections as a tool to teach. These days, you know, it's not really, kind of more frowned upon because we have some other tools available that weren't there then. The compulsion was artistic. You know, I've seen these guys like they were walking on air, you know, the dog just gliding, head up, tail wagging. You know, the image that you're given by people who think it's cruel and inhumane is the dog's going to have his head down and his
Tail
ears
between the legs.
Yeah, like scared to death. Well, you know, if you suck at dog training, then yeah, you're going to have that. You shouldn't even hold a leash. But, you know, if you understand the whole thing and you've practiced and you study with people who know and do well, then the dogs win, the clients win. It's a win for everybody. But throwing the baby out with the bathwater is not a good idea. And it seems to be going that way. That's over corrective thing. Now these people don't want to teach. They want to go straight to, I'm getting paid. These people want to see results now. You know, it's like, wait a minute. Nothing happens in a moment.
That's it. That's it. And that's the whole, that's it in a nutshell.
Really jumbled up. You know, I know we've had this talk over and over again, but you
throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That's a good title.
And I think that
the
is
e-collar analogy is a really, I'm sorry, I'll just real quick. I know Joe, you want to wrap up. So this is a really good example of how when someone opens their mouth, they don't understand something, right? An e-collar today, especially with today's technology, okay, like, and I'm not an e-collar trainer, but they have tone, they have vibrate, and they have stimulation, right? Those are your three options on most collars now, okay? Most dog trainers, especially the younger generation, they see e-collar, they don't even understand that an e-collar with its vibrate feature can be charged the same way as clicker training. It's the same exact thing. Like, you know, back in the day when a beeper used to vibrate, right? You could use the vibrate option with a positive association for recall, for instance, right? So a bad tool, it can be used the exact same way as a clicker.
Sure.
And that's where, if you're closed-minded, you don't see that. So you'll never be able to help that person in a wheelchair who has a problem controlling their dog around the house because they physically can't. And you'll say, can't do it.
Can't do it. There's nothing I can do. Yeah.
So I'll shut up.
That's okay. Thank you, Jeff. I'm actually glad you said that. And but
Mhm.
that does seem like a good place to leave it. I think it's like we talk about a lot about keeping your mind open and keeping your options open, and understanding that it, as Steve always says, it's complicated. With that, trainers, I want to thank you for being here today. I want to thank everybody for watching. And don't forget to like us on Facebook, and please give a thumbs up to this video. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we will see you next time. Thanks a lot, folks. Bye-bye.